Well, hey, Tip of the Spear. I wanted to follow up with our last video. Last week we talked about how everyone's a leader, and we arrived to that by the first commission, Genesis 1:28, which says, "Go forth and multiply and have dominion." And then the Great Commission, "Go and make disciples and teach them to obey the Lord." And those are universal commissions, meaning they apply to every Christian. You do not have to be a pastor, you do not have to be a missionary, you do not have to have the spiritual gift of evangelism to go and make disciples. Now, those things help or can help. There's definitely room for that. We can talk about that in another video. But everyone is a leader. And it doesn't matter if you have a job title or a service position or something like that where you're officially confirmed as a leader. So I want to talk through some scriptural examples of where the Bible talks about leadership so that we can build a biblical theology of leadership and make some applications from that and how we should then go forth and lead. So the first, and by the way, the first video here is going to be on the Old Testament, and I'll do the New Testament in a second video, so don't come at me with that whole, he didn't talk about Jesus thing. All the letters are red letters, so we'll get to Jesus in the next video. But the first example I want to talk about is Joseph. And you read about him in the latter half of Genesis, and Joseph was, that younger brother who no one liked, and they sold him into slavery by his own family. He is sold into slavery, and he becomes a slave in some Egyptian noble's household. But he does such a good job that he ends up being promoted to being head of the household, and he's managing it. And he's probably an attractive dude, and Potiphar's wife makes a move, and he resists and runs away, and she later accuses him of attempted rape, and so he's falsely imprisoned for like 18 years. So now he's sold into slavery, and now he's a prisoner, and there are two other people in Pharaoh's household that are in prison. I think the wine bearer and the baker, and they have some dreams, and Joseph has a prophetic word from the Lord, and he's faithful to proclaim it. And one of them remembers him to Pharaoh, and he's taken out of prison and made a member of Pharaoh's household, and eventually made into the prime minister. And what he ends up doing is preparing the nation and saving the nation from famine, a coming famine, and the Lord uses him to fulfill his covenant that he made with Abraham, and he saves his family. So the principle that I want to derive from that is you can be a leader in whatever position you're in. He was a leader as a slave. He was a leader as a prisoner. Those weren't leadership titles. He was faithful to the Lord and where the Lord had him, and thus he not only led individuals or households, he also led nations, and including the nation of Israel. All right, the next person I want to talk about is Moses, and there's a lot of examples that we have from Moses. I'm going to talk about after the Exodus. So this is in Exodus 18. His father-in-law comes by and sees all the work that Moses is doing, including sitting in judgment from morning to evening with all these other people standing around him. And Jethro, his father-in-law, says, "Man, this is not good. You need to develop some leaders, equip some leaders, and delegate responsibility. You need to put people over thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens and let them lead, because it's not good for one man to have all this responsibility." And so the principle that we can gather from that is Al or senior pastor or whoever is not the one responsible for what happens in the church. He's not the only one. He's not responsible to be the only one to lead. We are. The people are. Everyone is. And so all of you are CG leaders or deacons or something like that. And it is not just for Al to lead. It's not just for me to lead or Blake to lead or Alex or anyone else on staff to lead. It's for all of us to step out in where God has us and lead and delegate some of that responsibility so that things can get done well. We see that in the New Testament as well with the apostles and the deacons, which we'll talk about later. But there's that. So then the third example I want to talk about from the Old Testament is Moses and Joshua. You'll see, you can read about this like in Deuteronomy into the book of Joshua, but what Moses does is he creates his replacement. He raises up Joshua, trains Joshua, disciples Joshua, and makes his own replacement so that the people of Israel will have a leader when he dies. And he does that, and Joshua is now their leader when Moses dies, and he leads them into the promised land. He leads them in the campaign to claim the promised land from the Canaanites. The problem is Joshua didn't do the same thing. And we can make that implication because at the end of the book of Joshua, when he dies, there is no leader that stands up after him. And it says in the book of Judges that everyone was doing what they wanted to do, what they thought was right. And so God had to then create leaders of the judges to then lead the people. So there's actually a couple of things that we can get from that. The first is we should be training our replacements. We should be training people under us to do the job that we're doing. It'd be great if all of us can work ourselves out of a job and move on to other tasks that the Lord has for us. But if we're not leading people in our groups, in our families, in our jobs, whatever, to take over on our job, we're not really training them or lifting them up or equipping them to do anything. Secondly, an implication from this is if we fail, and we will because we're human beings and we're sinners, if we mess up and fail, guess who doesn't? God. God's faithful when we forget to be faithful. So God will not fail to give leaders and make sure leadership happens and equipping happens and disciples are being made just because we don't. Now, it's way better to be faithful and be part of the Lord and be a part of His work. But God is gracious to us that He is not going to have the church fail if we don't step up. Now, I'm exhorting us, let's step up. Let's keep leading. Let's keep pushing. But know that the weight and the responsibility of that is on the Lord more than on you. So that's it for this week. Next week, we'll talk about some examples from the New Testament to continue building a theology of leadership. Thanks, guys. It looks like we're bumping around. It's not because I'm in a Humvee. I'm in a little Fiat. The suspension on this thing sucks. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to go around you, sweetheart. There you go. Now, another example is Moses. Y'all know Moses. He is the deliverer of God's people out of Egypt through the Exodus. God's the deliverer, but He used Moses to do a lot of that work. And I'll just cut that part out.